What's up boys, I'm Shock. I'm a multi-rank 1 challenger mid laner. I've also played mid lane professionally for about 4 years now. Akshan is a really good champ to pick up for solo queue for a number of reasons. The first being that he's really snowbally, so if you get ahead, you can easily have games like this, even in high ranks. Also, he's an AD champ, so if you don't have one in your mid lane pool, that can be really useful to add. Finally, he's a really strong blind pick. He wins most of his lane, so that can be really useful for helping you out in champ select. Starting out with runes, Akshan has a lot less complex runes than other champions. He only has one keystone that he can really use, which is PTA, but within this, you actually can optimize a fair amount, so we'll kind of go over everything. First off, presence of mind, I'd say this is not really changeable. You could change it to Triumph or Overheal, but I think Akshan has like fairly high mana cost and he also like uses resets a lot. So if you can get the mana back in team fights, it's pretty useful. So I would recommend taking this most of the time. Now here, for your legend, you actually can change. So what I would recommend is that if you're going to rush shield bow, I would probably take attack speed. But if you're going to rush either Wit's End or something else, we'll get to that in the items section, then I'd recommend taking Bloodline. So that's basically, it's going to be dependent on what item you're building first. Then for here, honestly, Cut Down's going to give you the most value pretty much every game. It's tempting to take coup de grace, but honestly, it just doesn't, like, when you look at the stats at the end of the game, it never really actually contributes that much. So you could probably take Cut Down like 90% of games and it'd be fine. You could experiment taking this though. Okay, now when it comes to secondary is when things get a bit interesting. So your default secondary is definitely to take Resolve and to take Bone Plating and Overgrowth. Now the reason this is because the way Akshan's like trade pattern works is he like ease in, again we'll go over in the laning phase, but he kind of like ease in, and if you, it's kind of like Tristana where if you jump in with Bone Plating, then it's really hard for the enemy to trade back against you. But there are some champions where they'll just proc your bone plating super easily from range. So in that case, you'd want to take Second Wind instead, or you could even look to take Shield Bash or something. So there's like a lot of different things you can do with this runes. Like if you want really good scaling, Conditioning Overgrowth can be really good. If you want really strong early game, we can go Shield Bash and Bone Plating. So this kind of depends on your playstyle. Personally, I find Bone Plating and Overgrowth to be probably the best overall, but I also think Conditioning Overgrowth is really good as well. When it comes to your shards, attack speed and AD is pretty much mandatory, and then you can just choose between armor and MR. There are a few other things you can do with your secondary tree. You can go inspiration, you could go pretty greedy for scaling and take magical footwear and biscuits, or magical footwear and cosmic. So this would definitely be better scaling, but because Akshan's a champ that snowballs so hard, any advantage you can get in the early game normally translates pretty well into an advantage. So yeah, I still kind of recommend the Resolve tree. Finally, you could go Domination. For here, you would just be picking up stuff like Sudden Impact and Eyeball. So this does actually make you a little bit stronger early game, and it gives you a bit more AD if you snowball. But it's a bit inconsistent. Overall, I really recommend the Resolve tree and then just choosing runes in this tree, kind of like based on the matchup and based on what you need. Now, I'll let you guys easy off on the runes this time. There weren't that many to cover, but Akshan's items do actually have a fair amount to talk about, so let's get into it. For your starting items, this depends a lot on the matchup. You can either go Doran's Blade and a health pot, or you can go refillable with a longsword. You can also do longsword with 3 potions. It kind of depends. I think if you're in a lane where it's more going to be about all ends and you really value the HP, then the Doran's Blade is probably going to be better. But overall, I think Longsword Refillable or Longsword 3 Potions is better overall. It allows you to hit your spike a bit earlier in the game, and in most matchups, you can just like use the extra AD to be really aggressive. It's not often that Akshan actually like loses a matchup, so you don't really need the extra sustain and the extra HP from this normally. Moving on to early buys, this is where things start getting interesting. So Akshan has 2 main builds. He has the on-hit build, and he has the crit build, which we'll talk about a bit further down here. So your early buys are going to depend on which item you're rushing first. So you have a few items you can rush. You can either rush the shield bow or a different mythic, in which case you will want to pick up either Noon Quiver or Vampiric Scepter. So that also depends on what matchup you're in. So if you're in a matchup where you're winning and you're rushing one of those items, you probably want to go for the Noon Quiver. This gives you the most like early game power and it lets you snowball the hardest. So I'd really recommend picking up that. On the other hand, if you are rushing shield bow and you're in a difficult matchup, you probably want to pick up Vampiric Scepter. If you have lifesteal against mages that use mana, it pretty much makes you unkillable because normally you can sustain through all the damage until they get a blue buff, which is actually not too often in solo queue. So Vamp Scepter can make you really hard to deal with, especially for poke mages. Yeah, so if your matchup's quite difficult, I'd recommend picking that up. Obviously, boots, pretty useful. You want to get this basically all the time. Boots are really good on Akshan for roaming, for chasing people down. You want sustained, like long trades, so boots are really helpful on Akshan. So I'd definitely grab these on an early buy. Now, if you are going Negatron Cloak, this means you're rushing Wit's End, and we'll talk a bit more about that again below. But this can be a really powerful buy if the enemy have like 1 AP or 2 AP, either like an AP mid or a double AP mid jungle. So it can be good to itemize this, and this kind of fills the place of Merc Treads where other champs might go it, because you just get so much magic resist from this. So yeah, again, we'll kind of come back to this a bit more later. Now for your boot options, there are only the really 3 useful ones. Defensive boots are actually not bad on Akshan because he's so short ranged that like a lot of the time you are going to be taking damage kind of unavoidably. If you are going the MR, the Negatron, I wouldn't go Merc Treads as well. Unless you really need the tenacity, but in that case, again, you could probably take Cleanse. We'll get to that. But I think Steel Caps and Berserkers are definitely the most common things that I buy on Akshan. You kind of just need to evaluate whether you're going to take too much damage without them or not. If you don't really know, though, I would just go Berserkers. You can output an insane amount of damage, gives you a lot of attack speed, and they're really good overall. So next we have our standard builds. We have 2. We have the crit build and the on-hit build. So you're probably wondering, when do we pick up each one? So in my opinion, the crit build is better against tanks and also scales better. So it's 6 items. The crit build is probably stronger. On the other hand, on-hit is much better against squishies, and it spikes earlier in the game. So in solo queue, most of the time I would recommend going the on-hit build. But let's talk about the crit build first. So when you go the crit build, you want to rush your shield bow, your berserkers, and you can pick up either a collector or a Lord Doms. That'll be in the situational items, then IE, BT, and Wit's End. Now for the on-hit build, this is where things get a little bit interesting. You can either rush shield bow or Wit's End. So these are actually interchangeable, which order you get them in. The reason you pick up Wit's End first is if you're against like an enemy mid that's AP, you get a really high value out of the magic resist. Also, Wit's End is a stronger 1 item spike than shield bow. But that being said, Wit's End build path is a lot worse than shield bow. So if you are rushing Wit's End over shield bow, you really need to be getting value out of that MR, because otherwise the build path is just awful. So the way I would kind of think about this is, if you're versus an AD champ and you're building on hit, I would rush shield bow. If you're versus an AP champ and you're playing on hit, I would rush Wit's End. From then, you still have a lot of options. Normally you go Wit's End and shield bow and your boots. Then you pick up Rage Blade, PD, and GA. Now, again, this gets a bit interesting, because if you rushed shield bow because you're against an AD champ and they actually don't have many AP threats, then you could probably go Phantom Dancer second and just like not buy a Wit's End, or buy a Wit's End last. So then your build would look a bit more like a Vayne build, where you have shield bow, PD, Rage Blade, and then you're kind of building like tank or off tank items after that, or you can go a bit more damage. It's kind of up to you, depends on what the game needs. So there's a lot of different stuff you can do with your items, but overall, I do think the strongest is to rush Wit's End, then shield bow, Rage Blade, obviously picking up your boots when possible. So I think in this order is generally the strongest. So if you want like an all-purpose build, I'd say it's probably this. And then the only thing you really would need to change would be sometimes swapping whether you're rushing shield bow or Wit's End. But yeah, I do think the on-hit build is better overall. So moving to alternate mythics, obviously there are only 2 others, the Kraken Slayer and Gale Force. Both these are actually pretty good on Akshan, but they are quite difficult to play. They both do increase your damage, but because Akshan is so short range and you're always like Eing into people, having the shield bow, both for the HP, lifesteal, and the shield, are all really valuable. So I would recommend that in most games. If you are going the tank killing build with with this crit build here, you could go Kraken Slayer instead of Shield Bow, and that could be quite good. And then you replace this Collector with an Lord Doms, and that probably gives you the most effective tank killing build. So that's definitely an argument for Kraken. Another reason to pick up Gale Force would be it does help with dodging certain things. You know, it gives you an extra dash. It's helpful for helping finish off a target and making sure you get the reset. So it can be good. Again, yeah, they do a bit more damage, but overall, I find the shield bow to be a lot better and a lot more consistent. So moving on to situational items, we do have a few to talk about. So the first off is the Lord Dominic's Regards. This, you're only going to build this in the crit build, and it should replace your what's it called? It should replace your Collector as your second item. So pretty much if they have one tank or more, I would recommend picking up Lord Doms. It's actually insanely effective, even against squishies. The only reason Collector is like somewhat decent is because like in solo queue, a lot of the times there are like 5 squishy champs, and it can help you execute them, get your resets. But Lord Doms is like really good too. Honestly, you can just go Lord Doms like every game instead of Collector, and it's not even that bad. But I do think if they have like one armor builder or more, it gets really insane value. So next we have Wit's End. As we know, Wit's End is a staple in the on-hit build, but Wit's End can actually be built in the crit build too. So Wit's End is your most effective way of getting magic resist as Akshan. So even in the crit build, you can just like look to fit it in basically whenever you need MR. Like if they have a really AP heavy team, Wit's End can be really high value. Next is GA. So GA can get you a lot of value in both builds. One underrated thing about GA is the build path. Because it builds out a stopwatch. Stopwatch can be, you can kind of think about it as this should allow you to win one fight really hard. If you use your stopwatch effectively, it gives you so much value. And so you can use a stopwatch to win a fight really hard, and then you can use a GA to win another fight really hard. So even though GA as an item, it's like not that good, these two items, like building out a stopwatch and then building into GA, it gives you two really good chances to get like an insane team fight and snowball off of it. So you can definitely pick it up as like your fourth item. I wouldn't recommend picking up before IE or Rageblade, but you can pick it up as your fourth item if you need to. Now moving on to BT and Phantom Dancer. So BT is a situational item for the crit build. I probably wouldn't build it in an on-hit build, but you can build it in the crit build. It gives you a lot of damage. It also just increases your lifesteal. If you already have shield bow and BT, it makes you like pretty much unkillable. It can be a really nice item to pick up, especially if you're already snowballing really hard and you still want damage, but you also don't want to like throw away your 700 gold shutdown. So next we have Phantom Dancer. This can be built in both the on-hit and crit builds, but I think in the on-hit build especially, picking this up fourth item is really insane. It gives you a bit more attack speed, and when you've already got your Rage Blade, it'll let you do some crazy damage. Obviously, you can pick it up in the crit build, either as a replacement for BT or just like rounding out your 5th and 6th items, but it's definitely way better in the on-hit build. So next we have Mortal Reminder. Mortal Reminder is pretty good on Akshan. You can apply it to multiple people with your Q. You can easily swap targets and apply it with auto attacks. That being said, I would recommend picking it up before your third item, either your IE or your Rage Blade. These just give too much damage and it slows down your build too much if you pick it up. You can pick up just the base Executioner's Calling, and that can be pretty useful, but I definitely would not recommend picking this up into at least fourth item in either of your builds. Quicksilver Sash, yeah, it's just, you don't want to build this that often. Most of the time, if there are a lot of CC, you could get away with just taking Cleanse instead, but if you're against a champ like, Malzahar or Mordekaiser, you kind of do just have to buy this item. So yeah, it's just like situationally really good. Finally, Stopwatch. We have talked about this already. One thing I would say about Stopwatch is you actually can buy this, even if you have no intention of building it into Guardian Angel. So like I was saying before, Stopwatch gives you like one chance to win a fight really hard. So say it's like a 4th dragon fight, or like you're about to fight Baron, it can be a really good idea just to pick up a Stopwatch to give you that like one chance to get a really good fight. Obviously, you do have to use it well, but it's relatively inexpensive and it can translate into a lot of value. Moving on to sums. Sums are really straightforward on Akshan. There's basically only a few that you're going to use. First, you're going to use Flash and Ignite in like 99% of your games. The reason is Akshan is such a good all-in. He can snowball insanely hard with Ignite, and because he wins his lanes so hard, often you don't need any defensive sums. If you are in a really difficult matchup, you can take teleport instead. Honestly, I wouldn't really recommend it though in solo queue. It depends how hard you think the matchup's going to be, but a lot of the time, even in the hard matchups, if your opponent makes a mistake, you can actually still kill them with Flashing Knight. The only other sums that I really use regularly on Akshan is if there are a lot of CC on the enemy team, I will take Cleanse. With your kind of like lack of range and needing to be in the thick of it, Cleanse is very valuable. Yeah, and it saves you buying like Merc Treads or QSS, so it can save you a lot of gold in that way. The only other sums that are really used for like Exhaust and Barrier, this is just if you're an Assassin matchup, some of the difficult ones like Zed, for example. You could take Exhaust in those matchups, and that allows you to like bully them really hard and never really give them a window to be all in. So now we get to Akshan's abilities. First off, we have his passive, which is like a big reason of why Akshan's really strong. So the way this works is that when you attack, if you just let it happen, you'll attack twice. And if you attack and cancel the second shot, you'll get movement speed. Also, what you just saw there is every 3 hits from attacks or abilities do additional damage, and you get a shield. So what this means in practicality is that in the early game, you have like 2 really big strengths. First, you can outpush basically any champ by just double hitting minions like this, because there's pretty much no champ that can match that early. And also, it makes it really easy to proc PTA, as you can see, when it just gets me 2 marks straight away. The other reason this is so strong is that a lot of the mid lane champs have like skill shots that are really important to hit. So if you just constantly attack the wave and are moving around with your bonus movement speed like this, you're like really, really hard to hit, especially once you get boots. So for this reason, Akshan's passive, probably the strongest part of his kit, and a big part of the reason why he's so strong in the early game. So next, we have Akshan's Q. This throws a boomerang and it extends the range based on how many things you hit. So if you just throw it in front of you, you can see it doesn't go that far, but if you say if there are a bunch of enemies stacked up, it'll actually extend the range pretty far. Now this is really useful for a lot of reasons. First off, it makes it really easy to clear waves. You can just like throw down a wave like this, and also even if you don't put points in Q early, it actually applies 2 marks of your passive to everything, and so you can just like throw it down the creep wave, and then you can just auto each of the creeps once to proc your passive for the extra damage on it. Another thing is it does give you a little burst of movement speed, so that can be useful for helping chase people down or for running away from people or anything like that. So next we have the W. This is a pretty complex ability. When you press it, it puts you invis, and now you're actually permanently invisible as long as you're next to a wall. But if you leave a wall, it gives this little circle, and then after that you run out of the stealth. Now the passive on this ability is basically when enemy champs get a bunch of kills on your teammates, like in a team fight, they'll get marked as a scoundrel. And so that means when you kill them with that mark on them, you get extra gold and you revive any of your teammates that died to him. Also, your W, when you're in this like stealth mode, it doesn't give you extra movement speed by default, but if the person is marked, if they are a scoundrel, then you do get extra movement speed towards them. It also gives you this nice like circle here to tell if you've been spotted or not, so that can be useful for figuring out like how far up you can be. Okay, moving on to E, this is Akshan's signature ability. That you attach to the wall and you kind of like grapple on it, and you also shoot while you're on it. Also, when you jump off, you fire 1 more shot, and you can cancel it with E, so if you want to cancel it early and get the extra shot, you can do it like that. You can't auto attack while you're on it, but it does an insane amount of damage anyway. Also importantly, it resets on takedown, so you know, if you can use this to get a quick kill, and then you can use it again. So last we have Akshan's ult. So the way this works is it's point and click, sort of like Caitlyn ult, where you lock onto a target and then over 2.5 seconds it charges up and then shoots bullets at them. So if you activate it early, you actually fire less bullets, but it fires off earlier. This is also an execute. They do more damage based on missing health. So against a low HP target, oftentimes you can just like let it charge up halfway, or you can even just instantly tap it. So this is something you're going to have to get used to, about just like knowing when they're low enough to kill, basically. Now, the next thing that I should quickly talk about is what order do you want to max them in? Well, there's actually a few ways to do maxing on Akshan. So probably the most standard and, in my opinion, the best overall is to max E. This gives you really strong trading power and also gives you really strong skirmishing power. That being said, in a lot of matchups and a lot of the very difficult matchups, you're actually going to have trouble Eing onto people because they'll have ways to cancel it, or they'll just like out-trade you if you E onto them. So in those matchups, you actually want to max Q and then E. So normally you max E, Q, W, and then you put a point in alt whenever you can. But in the more difficult matchups, you may want to max Q and then E and then W. Now, and a lot of the time, I actually don't put a point in W until level 8. The reason is because this doesn't help you in lane phase, and it's sort of hard to roam in the early game. So oftentimes you can do like EQ, EQ, so like not putting a point in W until level 8, you skip it at level 4. I find that to be quite useful. Another thing you can do is you can actually put 3 points in Q and then max E instead of fully maxing Q. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with the abilities. I guess like the main thing to know is that both of these abilities are really good and W is pretty low value. So you can actually like mix and match. If you need more points in Q, you just put points in Q. If you need more points in E, you put points in E. I wouldn't recommend like literally split maxing them, like doing one of each. We'll go over it a bit more in the laning phase and matchups based on like when you want which one. So Akshan's combos are really basic, and I think he's pretty easy to play. So the basic trading combos, you have 2 in lane. So the first is if you can hit someone with a Q through the creeps for movement speed, and then you can look to AA them a couple times to proc the PTA. That's probably that's like a really strong trade and probably the easiest one. The next one is if you can just like, if someone's standing too close to a wall, it's very easy to E like close to them like this and trade like that. So there we didn't actually shoot them without E at all. We just got close to them so that we could Q them and auto attack them. Obviously, if they are standing close to a wall where you can actually E them, that is really good too. So for example, if they were standing here and we could get in range, that instantly procs the passive and the PTA. So that does a ton of damage. So that's mainly what you're looking for in lane. You're looking for opportunities to E on your opponent when they're out of position, or failing that, you're just like looking to try find a way to close the distance and hit them with your Q so that you can proc your passive. So there's a few other useful combos. The first is that you can use your ult during your E, and you can actually use this like at the start or during your E. So for example, you can ult first and then E, and the bullets will still go off. Alternatively, you can actually E first and still press R, and it'll still work like that. This can be like sort of useful. You got to remember that creeps block Akshan's ult and sort of like jungle camps and towers. So it's like blockable by a lot of things, and you can use this to make it hard for them to just like stand behind an enemy champion or stand behind a tower. So that can be kind of useful. There are a few advanced combos on Akshan, but I haven't found them to be super useful. This one's probably the most useful though. You can actually extend the range of your Q by flashing like this. So all I'm doing here is I'm pressing Q, and then during the animation, I'm flashing forward, and that extends the range of it. It can be kind of surprising for that kind of like range to come out. So that can be one thing you can think about. So one other thing you can do, I haven't found this to be that useful, is you can like Q here and flash this way to kind of like change the direction it's going. Now, interestingly, you'll see that even though the Q is going this way, it actually applied the passive mark twice. So sometimes when you do this, the visual, see again, won't actually match what's happening. And sometimes it will, see like this. It's important that you actually aim where you want the Q to go as opposed to like queuing in front of you and flashing, because then it won't really work. So you want to aim your Q where you want it to go after your flash. It's also important that you flash quickly enough, otherwise it won't really work that well. Finally, one other thing that could be useful, not really a combo, but you can actually get vision in bushes even if you don't hit an enemy in it. So if I Q in here, I can actually see this training dummy even though I'm not hitting it. So that can be kind of useful for getting you like vision over walls and stuff like that. So moving on to Akshan's laning phase. As Akshan in lane phase, it's very simple pretty much throughout the entire game. You're looking for an opportunity to all in with your E. So you're like looking for them to waste a cooldown or to move too far up in the lane, and generally you can all in them with E. Akshan's different from other champs because he doesn't really change his playstyle after level 6. His ultimate doesn't really contribute that much. So he kind of just has the same pattern throughout the entire laning phase. So the first thing as Akshan is you generally want the wave to be in the middle. The reason is that means like you can really easily E on them and you can like chase people down. Akshan's really good at extended trades, but he can't really punish people under tower that well, or if the wave's on his side. So you really want the wave to either be just like in the middle or on your side. The exception of that is if you do want to roam, obviously you should push the wave under your tower, before roaming, but obviously at level 1, we're not looking to do any roaming, so we just won the wave in the middle. Akshan has just an insanely strong early game, and there's very few champs that outtrade him, so oftentimes, even if your opponent does have cooldowns up, sometimes you can even run at them. So yeah, you can see like at level 1 here, I can just like bully out the Katarina really hard and make her leave the lane. There's basically nothing she can do about this. Like I was saying, Akshan, he like barely loses lane to anyone. As long as you like punish cooldowns with your E, yeah, you're like really, really strong. So here, because she's not pushing the wave at all, I just want to slow push this in. The reason is I want this wave to bounce back to me. If you fast push it, she can like keep it frozen outside her tower, or sometimes the wave will get completely killed under the tower. But I actually want this wave to bounce back to me. Melee champs like Katarina can't really farm from like distance, so they've got to always come up to the wave. So if I slow push that under the tower, it should bounce back here after she clears it out. So here we're just trying to harass her when she goes for creeps. Remember that because Akshan's auto attacks is so strong, you can like absolutely destroy people with harass when they go for creeps, especially melee champs. And because of your shield, it's really hard for them to trade onto you. Now, this is like a dream situation for Akshan. So even though she's level 3 and I'm level 2, the wave's pushing back to me, and pretty soon the wave's going to be like up here on this side, and then it's going to be like really, really hard for Katarina to do anything, because like we said before, we're looking for that time when they're too far up in the lane or they've used cooldowns and they're just like really easy to chase down. So see, I'm pretty happy here about the way the wave is going. Okay, so now the wave is like really close to my side, and another thing worth noting is I have bone plating up. You can see if it's on cooldown down here. So while you have bone plating up, you can E into people like really aggressively, and there's like not that much they can do to you. So here, because the wave is like pushing up, Katarina has creep advantage. She actually E's on me. But I have bone plating, and I also have my E up. So if anyone ever does this, if like here, she's far up in the lane, she's used cooldowns. So those are the two like flags in our head that we need to all in. So even though there's a Katarina right on top of me, I know I absolutely destroy her in this. And as you can see, it's like not even close. Like I kill her, 50% health left, and also the wave is frozen. So that's kind of the main thing you want to look for as Akshan. Again, you're just looking for that. You're really looking to all in with your E when they waste cooldowns or they're too far up in the lane. So here, looking at another example that's much the same, we have Silas versus Akshan. So this is like pretty much the same as what we said before. We want the wave in the middle. If he wastes stuff, we will look to all in him. So skipping ahead a bit, we have this like fight that's happening in the river, and while this is happening, Silas actually walks up too far in the lane, and he's really easy to all in, especially because he was already at 50% health. So you have like such a strong all in. You're like always looking to try find that all in. So if you find your opponents playing too safe, it can be good to put a point in W and then look to roam elsewhere. So here, the Silas has been playing like pretty far back and not really giving me that many windows to all on him. So I'm going to start looking, especially because I'm level 6 now and I do have my ult so I can execute people. I'm starting to look for roam. So you can easily just like walk around with your W like this, and you can either walk to other lanes or you can just walk to jungle skirmishes, and that will normally allow you to pick up some kills. So you can see again here, I've noticed that the enemy bot lane is pushed up a bit too far, so I can just run down and kill them. It's really important on Akshan that you do look for ways to snowball, because he does snowball really well, but he's also like not that useful for behind, so you do kind of need to find ways to get kills, or to at least not fall behind. Finally, if you're in a lane where you can't really seem to pick up a kill and you also can't seem to get any roams off, it is okay just to farm. Like the most important thing is that you don't actually like fall behind. As long as you can keep your CS like really high and just wait for ganks, like kind of keep the wave pressured. Normally you can eventually find a way to snowball. It only really takes like one death from the enemy to really snowball in your favor. Action takes place really quick, as you can see here, so you can get a lot of gold if the enemy mid leaves at the wrong time, and you can just auto down the tower. So in summary, the main things for Akshan's lane, you're looking to punish cooldowns by Eing in aggressively when they either are too far up in the lane or they waste a cooldown. The second thing is you really need the wave to be either in the middle or on your side. That way it's much easier to all in them. If you can't all in your opponent, they're just like playing too safe or you can't kill them, look to roam elsewhere, either to like bot lane, top lane, or to the jungle. It's pretty important that you can get kills, but if you can't get any, Akshan does have a really strong one-item spike, so you can easily carry team fights and skirmishes as long as you don't fall behind before that point. So you can just keep pressuring your lane and staying high on CS, and you should still come into the mid game pretty strong. So for team fighting on Akshan, there's two things that are really important. There's the pre-team fight setup, and obviously there's the team fight itself. So before the team fight starts, you want to do one of two things. You either want to be in a flank position where you can hit their carries, like kind of for free. You're like invis on the side, or you just have a good flank on them so that you can like easily E into their carries, or you want to be positioned kind of like behind your front line so you can DPS for free. Because there's like a few ways Akshan can play team fights. Either he can just like DPS the front line, or he can just like look to kill the back line. But you can't do both normally. So the pre-fight setup, it's important you're either in one of those. So in this clip here, I'm in a flank position before the team fight starts, and I'd say this is like better, but it requires you to be fed sort of. So here, if you can like find the ADC early, you can like take them out of the fight, and then you can do some like real cool shit because you got like executes and resets. So if you can manage to get a good flank position, you can like easily clean up a team fight and make it really difficult for their carries to play. Now, if you can't get into a flank position, either because you can't kill their backline or just like kind of the way the game's going means you can't get there, like in this clip here, we're almost at their base, there's like no way I can get a flank. You just want to play behind your front line and play to kill their front line. So here you can see I'm just kind of playing back. I'm hitting the Cho'Gath. I don't really want to use my E until people are getting low and I have a really good way to go in. So we're just kind of kiting back, waiting for them to come to us. But once we start turning the team fight around, we can start looking to E aggressively and get people low. So from the same game here, I tried to find a flank, but I couldn't quite get it. So we've kind of ended up in the same situation before where we're kind of just like going to have to hit the front line and we're standing behind our front line. So here, we start off with an engage, and I'm starting to do a lot of DPS to the Cho. Me and the Kog'Maw shred this guy. Kang gets a really good engage on us, so here we've just got to like peel back pretty much. So we're just peeling back. We can't really use our E at all until people get a bit lower. But here, we've managed to kill their tanks. And now people are like sort of low, so we can start looking to be aggressive with our E again. So I just get some ult poke on this guy, Bard hits an ult, and then we come in. So it's actually fine if you play like front to back and just like maximize your auto attack damage on Akshan, but it's really important that yeah, you're either looking for a flank or you're playing for like that frontline DPS, and you can do both in the same fight, right? Like you can see there, if you kill their frontline, that's when you can start looking to use your E afterwards. So in summary, for Akshan team fighting, you want before the fight to either get set up in a flank where you can access their backline carries and kind of look to clean up the fight on them, or you want to be in a place where you're kind of like behind your front line and you can safely DPS their front line. For most of the team fight, Akshan kind of plays like a traditional kind of like short range AD carry, sort of like similar to Vayne, where you're just trying to like output as much damage as possible and not die. And then towards the late end of the fight, Akshan plays more like Katarina, where he's trying to like E onto people, he's trying to reset and clean up the fight. So keep those things in mind, just try and output as much damage as you can without dying with your auto attacks, and then when people get low, look to E in and clean them up. Lastly, we have Akshan's matchup. So one thing you need to keep in mind is that Akshan wins basically every single lane in the game. He does have some which are harder than others, definitely some he can lose, but even in these cases, often you can just like change your itemization, or you can max Q instead of E, and it can like fix up the matchup. The ones that are difficult for Akshan are normally ones that either have like really strong extended trades, so champs like Aurelia or Cassiopeia that can actually fight Akshan, or other things that can be difficult, ways to like cancel his E or to make it so you can't really attack after you E. So for example, Syndra can cancel Akshan's E, or like Lux, for example, can root Akshan after he gets off his E, so you can kind of just like kite him out and he doesn't actually get to auto attack you. So champs like that are quite difficult. And then on the other hand, champs that are easy for you are things that don't really have a way to stop you from auto attacking them, and also just can't match you in your extended trades. But overall, like Akshan's a really strong blind pick. He does win most of the lanes, and you can definitely win the rest of them pretty much through just like playing smart or building correctly. If you want the specifics, I do go over them all in my modifier guide, which I've linked in the description. Just look for the threats section. It goes over which runes to take and how to play the matchup. Thank you all for watching, guys. If you stuck through the end, I really appreciate it. If you liked it, go ahead and subscribe. Really appreciate that a lot. I'm going to be making a few more guides before the next season starts, so make sure to stick around, and I'll see you guys next time.